here, I saw this and I was researching something else. This is only about 4 weeks ago. Saw that picture, saw that name, and I thought, this is somebody I need to find out about. So I'm going to share a little bit about her with you tonight, and eventually we'll get around to her connection to our area. So first of all, her name, Wealthy. Found out that was kind of a common name. That was a Puritan name. Didn't know that. They were part of the original Mayflower colony. Her dad, as I researched her, was named John Fuller Eddy. Well, am I related? Yeah, I actually am. Back to the Mayflower. Our ancestor is Edward Fuller that was on the Mayflower. And it was a direct, so wow, okay, there's a connection. The other thing about her, look at her hands and the bow. I love the bow on her hair, but I thought, what has this lady been through? She looks like somebody that could outwork me right now. She's a strong lady. So that's what got me researching Wealthy Eddy. So her family were Puritans. They left Massachusetts to go to Maine, partly because there was a kind of a uprising of kind of conflict within their community over some that were joining the Shakers, and so there was kind of a religious movement, and their family felt like they wanted to stay Puritan, so they went to Maine. So they went up, I took that slide out. Anyway, they moved to Maine, and Wealthy was born in 1810, the fifth of 10 children. When she was 10 years old, they moved to a town called North Java, New York. And if you look where that is, we know of a little community right here between Rochester and Syracuse, known as Palmyra. So about 80 miles from Palmyra is where they moved. And the year was 1820. So there was a lot of, they moved from Massachusetts to escape kind of some religious conflict. And they moved to this area where there was a whole lot of religious conflict going on. So it was an interesting blend there of their religion and what was going on. This family, the Eddy family, they were incredibly self-sufficient family. They had a large home and land. They became very wealthy. They taught their children how to make soap and cloth from the actual wool from the sheep. They raised their sheep all the way through to dyeing it and running it through the spinning wheel, the whole thing, and taught their children all along the way, all the different methods. They had a room in their home, this large home, just for teaching their children these things so they could be self-sufficient. They boiled maple down to make syrup. Just a lot of things within that home that taught those children a lot. And the biggest one was sewing. And Wealthy learned how to sew because they took the process of cloth all the way through. And she learned how to sew and was very good at it at a very young age. They made cheese they were just an incredible family. And they were very well off and became well known in the community. When she was 20 years old, so now we're up to 1830. She became really curious regarding that religious fervor and excitement that was going on in the area. And that's right when the Latter-day Saint Church had just been formally organized. It was 1830. So she was curious, and she was at that age where you kind of want to go out and be independent, 20 years old. So she went to a couple of meetings. Well, her father found out about that. Locked her in the house, imprisoned her in their own house, and refused to let her go anywhere. She managed to escape. I don't know how long she was locked up, but she managed to escape and got to a river or a lake. There are a couple of accounts, as all history does, there are different viewpoints. Got to a river or a lake and likely had someone help her begin to row across the river. And her dad and brothers were chasing after her and shot at them as they rowed across the river. So, needless to say, she didn't see her family again. She did not feel welcome and was gone. So, that's kind of the story there. She met a man, there's not a picture of him, named Stephen Billings Shumway. Stephen was already a member of the church. He was baptized in 1830. So in 1831, they got married. They had a child, a girl. I better refer to my notes or I'll get this wrong. I'm already at the second page. I don't even need these, right? Yes, they had their first child in 1831, Clarissa, and wealthy Eddy joined the church that year. So she was able to keep investigating it. They joined the church, and then they joined the saints in Kirtland. So they left the Nauvoo area and went to Kirtland. This was their second child, Ammi Warren Shumway. He was born in 1832. The next year, that first daughter, Clarissa, died as a result of exposure from the mobs chasing them out of Kirtland. They were able to go back to Kirtland, but they lost their first child as a result of religious persecution. So, tells you a little bit about immediately. They were right in the thick of all that was going on there. They were part of the mass exodus from Kirtland in 1838, and they fled toward Jackson County. Now, Wealthy was pregnant again as they were fleeing in 1838. They were on their way to Jackson County, and they were with a group that was going to a place called Hans Mill. 12 days before the big massacre at Hans Mill, they had to stop a few weeks before, and 12 days before, she had another baby. So having that third child saved them from being a part of that massacre at Hans Mill. I'm behind a little bit. There's just an artist's depiction of Hans Mill and that massacre there. So they were saved, but they were right there. They were just outside the city, about 60 miles, I believe, because of that baby that was born. They ended up losing that baby as well. So the one son, Ammi, is the only son out of that marriage. So they get to Nauvoo, join with the saints there, and she meets a man in Nauvoo who was a widower and gets married. His name was William Dickinson Pratt. Woo woo. No Pratts? Come on. I know my own family is, anyway. He is the older brother of Parley P. Pratt, who is our three great-grandpa. So that's a family member there.
So did her first husband then die?
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped that, didn't I? Yeah. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. So they get to Nauvoo. Right when they get there, he gets appendicitis and dies. Thank you. You keep me on my toes. I need that.
It's a dirty job that somebody's
So Stephen Shumway died right there, right when they got to Nauvoo. So that's in my notes too, but I skipped it. Thanks. So then she marries a widower. William Dickinson Pratt's wife had just passed away, and he had a few kids as well. So they joined families there in Nauvoo. Handsome dude. Does he look like me too? Again, that's the older brother of Parley P. Pratt. So by marrying this man, it put her in kind of the inner circles of Nauvoo, wealthy Eddy. So here she is, not very far removed from being shot at as she rode across a lake. And she's now in the inner circles, meetings and so on, with church leadership in Nauvoo. Let me make sure I'm caught up here so I don't skip something else. You'll tell me though. Yeah. So they had 4 children together, but only one lived to adulthood, and that was William Jared Pratt. Okay, so William Jared Pratt, we're going to talk about in a minute, but that was their only son. Her mother-in-law, Charity Pratt, also moved in with them because she was living with another son the Pratts were really poor. And of course it was a hard time anyway. So that was a blended family, including his mother, Charity, that joined there in that family. So this next one, I'll just kind of go through this. 1844. William Dickinson Pratt is called to a mission to New York. While he's gone, William Jared Pratt is born. While he's gone, Joseph and Hiram Smith are martyred at Carthage jail. And he does come back after that, the father here, William Dickinson Pratt. And then later that year is when the saints gathered So she was, the reason I bring this up, she was a witness to all these events happening, including having a newborn son, which was a pattern of her life, to be kind of alone. So there's their son, William Jared Pratt. I'm going to go through the timeline. This will help speed up this whole story a little bit. But the son that the daughter that her and William Dickinson Pratt had, 5-year-old Martha, dies in 1847. Stephen Pratt is born, dies 5 months later. So they were across the river by that time in Iowa, and Welty insisted that Stephen get buried with Martha over in their family burial plot in Nauvoo. And they actually rode back across the river. The mob met them, and they begged, and the mob gave permission for them to go bury that son. I thought that was kind of neat. Anyway, so she gives birth to another child, the final one between her and William Dickinson. Check out that name, Mirza Lyona. I had no idea. And then at some point in there, they were divorced. And that was really strange to me. There was a record of them being divorced. And I really don't know why. I know that he was gone a lot, William Dickinson Pratt. And whether that had anything to do with it, I don't know. Because he went on missions with his brother and went all over the place. And that was a hard time anyway. So, Welty and her 3 living children start west. So that's Amy Shumway, 15. That's the young man that was born in Kirtland. William Jared Pratt and this newborn. So she takes off alone to go across the plains. And again, there are other histories that say he was with her the whole way, but yet they were divorced. So it's kind of odd there. But she ends up going to Salt Lake and settles in Payson. Another baby dies. 3-year-old Mirza dies. Then she marries another widower, William C. Patton. She's now 44. He has 2 children. They have another child. This Mountain Meadows story, the thing that you're catching here is all the events that Welty witnessed in her life. They were living in Payson, and the dispatch rider from southern Utah, coming up on a horse to try to get word to Brigham Young of what might be happening down there, stopped at the Patton home in Payson. They provided him with Amy's favorite black horse, and he takes off to go meet with Brigham Young. So he meets Brigham Young. The famous saying is, "Spare no horse flesh, get back down there, stop this. Don't let them do what they were doing. Let the settlers from Arkansas go through." He turns around, he comes back. I don't know if it was the same dispatch rider that was sent, but he comes back through, stops at the Patton home again in Payson. And Welty, bless her heart, just like my own mother, insisted on feeding him lunch. And he said, "No, I need to change horses." He gave back the beautiful black horse that Amy had. And she says, "Well, at least take a sack lunch." I don't know the word she used, but she provided him with a sack lunch as he got back on the horse and took off. And of course, sadly, he was too late getting back down to southern Utah, and that horrible event happened. So do I look like him?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah?
Just the hair.
Just the hair?
Yeah.
I looked all over for a better picture of this guy, thinking there's got to be a better picture. And that was as good as I could find. That was her husband there, 3rd husband, Wealthy Eddy. They get called to a little town known as Muddy River, Franklin. So here they are. Now that group is now in Franklin. Wealthy, our friend from the Puritan colony, is now in Franklin. Their son is part of that group, and you find records of some of these names in the original settlers of Franklin. Amy Warren Shumway, their son, he gets a job freighting to Montana and disappears. The first story they get is that the Indians ambushed him and killed him because they found something that was his in this burned down wagon. Years later, they find out he just went to Canada, and he left his children with Wealthy. So now she's got a couple grandchildren that she's taking care of. The Pattons separate, and this is another one. There's another record saying that they divorced. So he went over the hill with Charles C. Rich. With that group to go help settle Bear Lake Valley. But she stayed here and went with her son, William Jared Pratt, to Oxford. he became the first, they call it bishop, but Clifton wasn't a ward then. So it was the first bishop of the Clifton branch of the Oxford ward. So she was with him. There are records of him and her living in Oxford, and he served. So I had that sign up in the hall there, the picture I showed you in Clifton Church. He's not on there because Clifton wasn't a ward. So they were in Oxford, Franklin, then Oxford. She lives with different children throughout her life and died at age 82. So that was the years, and then they formed a ward there. This was a side note that I thought was kind of fun. William Jared Pratt had a son named William Orson Pratt. William Orson Pratt married a school teacher, this lady right here, named Sophia Caroline Keller. In the little settlement of Mink Creek, and there's some names you might recognize there as well. She was an aunt to Ronnie Keller, that I think most of us in here know. So kind of a neat little connection there to another settlement here in the valley. He ended up being the sheriff over in Cassia County and centered in Albion at the time. And so there's quite a bit of records about him and his family and some of the things that went on over in that county later on. So, but they started out living up in Mink Creek when they first got married. So summarize wealthy Eddy. I know that was a long story, but I think there was a lot to that and everything that she went through. She escaped imprisonment and gunshots from her own family, joined the church early, worshipped in all of these temples. Kirtland, Nauvoo, Salt Lake, Logan, buried one husband, divorced 2 others, outlived her 8 children and all 3 husbands. Avoided the massacre by having a baby at Hans Mill, just outside Hans Mill. She used her seamstress skills to help sew the burial clothing for Joseph and Hiram. I thought that was kind of neat. Part of those expulsions out of Kirtland and Nauvoo provided the horse. First families in Franklin, first families in Oxford and Clifton. She was a part of all of that. So, neat lady, rocking the hair both. So, it's kind of fun to see, I want to learn more about her and then just dive in and see what you can find. So, that one was kind of a fun one for me anyway. Let's see.
So Cache Valley, it was really pronounced Cassia?
No, that was over in the Burley area. Cassia? Cassia. Yep, over in that area. So,